My parents refused to let me buy interview clothes. Just wear your sister's old suit. You do not deserve new things. I walked into the biggest interview of my life for a senior financial position in a faded yellow suit held together with safety pins. The billionaire CEO stood up, handed me her designer blazer, and said, "I know exactly who put you in that suit. My name is Nia, and I am 28 years old. Before I tell you how I brought down my family and their fake empire, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the black sheep who finally fought back." I stood in the marble kitchen of my parents' upscale Atlanta estate, my hands trembling with rage. I just needed $200, a tiny fraction of the trust fund my grandfather left me, a fund my mother Valerie controlled with an iron fist. I had the final interview at Sterling Holdings in 2 hours, and my bank accounts were frozen. "Mom, please," I said, keeping my voice level. "It is for a skirt. Sterling Holdings is the top investment firm in the country. I cannot walk in looking unkempt." Valerie did not look up from her morning mimosa. She adjusted her expensive silk robe and scoffed. "You should have thought about your appearance before you got fired for a data leak. You brought shame to this family, Nia. We have a reputation at the country club to maintain. You do not get to use family money to dress up a failure." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. The data leak was a massive setup. My white brother-in-law, Trent, who happened to be sitting across the kitchen island smirking over his newspaper, was the one who actually leaked the client records. He used my login credentials to do it. Trent managed the family wealth, and my parents treated him like a god. Trent took a slow, deliberate sip of his espresso. "Listen to your mother, Nia. You are a total liability right now. Be grateful we let you sleep in the guest room instead of out on the street. Keep whining and I will cut off your cell phone plan before you even leave this house today." My golden child sister Chloe sashayed into the kitchen holding a clear plastic garment bag. She ran a failing luxury lifestyle brand, fully funded by my parents, but they treated her like she was the next great business mogul. Chloe threw the bag directly at my chest. The heavy plastic hit me hard. "Wear this," Chloe said, rolling her eyes with utter disdain. "It is from 5 seasons ago, but beggars cannot be choosers in this house. At least it is a luxury designer label." I unzipped the bag. The smell of mothballs hit my face immediately. It was an atrocious mustard yellow pantsuit, at least 2 sizes too big for me. The fabric was stiff, unbreathable, and completely outdated. I looked at my mother pleadingly, but her cold stare told me the conversation was officially over. I went to the small guest room, grabbed a handful of silver safety pins, and began the humiliating process of pinning the waistband and the jacket so it would not fall off my body. Every prick of the metal pin felt like a harsh reminder of my place in this house. The scapegoat, the punching bag, the mistake. An hour later, I walked into the soaring glass lobby of Sterling Holdings. The building hummed with wealth. I kept my arms pinned tightly to my sides, praying the safety pins holding my pants together would not pop open. I approached the reception desk when a loud, obnoxious laugh echoed across the polished marble floor. I froze completely. Walking straight toward the private executive elevators were Chloe and Trent. They were dressed in impeccable custom suits carrying glossy presentation folders. I realized immediately they were here to pitch the Chloe brand for corporate investment funding. Trent spotted me and his smug smile widened into a truly malicious grin. He changed his path, deliberately steering Chloe right toward me. Before I could step away, Trent suddenly stumbled forward. He tipped his hot coffee directly onto my chest. The burning liquid soaked instantly through the yellow fabric, scalding my skin. I gasped in absolute pain, stumbling backward as one of the safety pins popped loose. "I am so sorry," Trent said loudly, ensuring everyone heard him. "I thought you were one of the janitorial staff. You really should not stand in the way of serious professionals." Chloe covered her mouth, giggling viciously behind her manicured hand. "Look at you, Nia. You are a complete disaster. You better leave before security throws you out onto the pavement." "Miss Nia Carter?" A sharp voice called out from the receptionist's desk, cutting right through the very cruel laughter. "The chief executive officer will see you right now." I refused to cry. I held my head high, clutching my ruined jacket closed, and walked right past my stunned sister and brother-in-law. I stepped into the elevator, ignoring the burning on my skin and the coffee dripping onto my worn-out shoes. When I entered the sprawling penthouse office, I expected rejection. Sitting behind a mahogany desk was the owner, a self-made billionaire. She looked up and her piercing dark eyes locked onto my coffee-stained mustard suit. I took a deep breath, ready to apologize, but she raised a single hand to stop me. She took off her pristine custom blazer. Without a single word, she draped it right over my shoulders, perfectly covering the dark coffee stains and the safety pins. "I know exactly who put you in that atrocious suit, Nia," she said. "30 years ago, your mother wore that exact suit to steal the deed from our grandmother. You are my niece." The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me, sealing me inside a boardroom that cost more than my parents' entire estate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Atlanta skyline, casting long, intimidating shadows across the polished mahogany table. I stood at the far end of the room, shivering slightly, as the air conditioning hit my coffee-soaked chest. The brown liquid had completely ruined the hideous mustard-yellow fabric seeping through to my skin. I felt like an absolute fraud. My hands instinctively gripped the edges of the oversized blazer, trying to hide the safety pins that were currently digging into my waist. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, fully preparing myself to be laughed out of the room. I had worked tirelessly to rebuild my life after my family discarded my professional reputation, and now, thanks to Trent's deliberate cruelty, my one chance at redemption was literally stained. The side door swung open. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as Ms. Sterling walked in. She was a legend in the financial district. A self-made black woman who had shattered every glass ceiling the corporate world had tried to put over her. She wore a pristine, impeccably tailored ivory suit that probably cost $5,000. Her silver hair pulled back into a sharp, elegant twist. She carried a sleek tablet, her eyes focused on the screen, her heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. She did not even look up at first. I braced myself for the inevitable disgust. I opened my mouth to apologize for my appearance, to explain that it was an accident in the lobby, to beg for just 10 minutes to pitch my data forensics portfolio. But the words died in my throat as she finally raised her head. She stopped dead in her tracks, her dark, piercing eyes locked onto my chest. She did not look at the coffee stain. She did not look at my face. She looked at the cut of the lapel, the specific shade of that awful mustard yellow, and the cheap, oversized buttons. For a terrifying 10 seconds, the silence in that massive room was absolute. Then slowly Miss Sterling set her tablet down on the mahogany table. She walked toward me with deliberate, measured steps. I wanted to shrink into the floor. Instead of calling for security, she reached up and unbuttoned her own immaculate ivory blazer. She slipped it off her shoulders, the silk lining gleaming in the morning light. Without a single word of explanation, she stepped into my personal space, gently pushed my coffee-stained jacket off my shoulders, and draped her $5,000 masterpiece over me. The fabric was warm, heavy, and smelled faintly of expensive cedar, an absolute success. I stood there completely paralyzed as she looked me dead in the eye. "I know exactly who put you in that atrocious suit, Nia," she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "You did not choose it. Valerie forced it on you just to remind you of your place." My heart slammed against my ribs. How did the most powerful CEO in the city know my mother by her first name? I opened my mouth to speak, but she raised a single manicured finger to silence me. 30 years ago, she continued, her gaze burning with an old, unhealed fury, your mother wore that exact same suit. She put it on for a very specific occasion. It was the morning she walked into a lawyer's office, forged our grandmother's signature, and legally stole the deed to the only property our family owned. She wore that mustard yellow suit the day she kicked me out onto the streets with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes. The floor felt like it was dropping out from underneath me. Our grandmother. My mind raced, piecing together the fragmented family history my parents always refused to discuss. My mother always claimed she was an only child who had to fight tooth and nail for everything she had. She erased her own bloodline to protect a stolen legacy. You are my aunt, I whispered, the reality of the situation crashing over me like a tidal wave. The missing pieces of my childhood suddenly aligned into a horrifying picture. My mother had not just been cruel to me, cruelty was her baseline. Ms. Sterling gave a short, bitter nod. I am. And I have spent 3 decades building a global empire while watching Valerie play high society socialite with stolen money. I watched her raise Chloe to be just as vain and empty as she is. And I watched how they treated you. The one child in that house with an actual brain, the one child who refused to play their toxic games. I know about the data leak, Nia. I know Trent framed you to protect his own incompetence, and I know your parents let him do it because he is the white savior managing their fragile wealth. She walked back to her desk, tapping the screen of her tablet. The massive monitor on the wall behind her flickered to life, displaying a complex web of financial transactions, offshore accounts, and corporate shell companies. I did not bring you up to this penthouse to interview you for a mid-level analyst position, she stated, her tone shifting from familial resentment to pure, calculated business. I brought you here because you are the best financial data forensic auditor in the city, and you have a personal score to settle. I am offering you the position of lead forensic director at Sterling Holdings effective immediately. Your salary will triple what you were making before Trent ruined your name, but this role comes with a highly classified Priority Zero assignment. I pulled her ivory blazer tighter around my shoulders, the lingering sting of the hot coffee entirely forgotten. I stood taller, the safety pins digging into my waist, no longer a symbol of humiliation, but a reminder of the war I was about to wage. What is the assignment? I asked, my voice steady and resolute. Ms. Sterling smiled, a sharp, predatory expression that matched the fire suddenly igniting in my own chest. She pointed a remote at the screen, zooming in on a specific cluster of investment portfolios. Your arrogant brother-in-law Trent manages the wealth of my biggest corporate competitor, she said smoothly. He thinks he is untouchable because your parents bow down to his every command. He thinks he can outsmart a room full of black women by simply existing in a tailored suit. I want you to tear his financial structures apart piece by piece. I want you to dig into every hidden ledger, every ghost account, and every dirty transaction he has ever authorized under his firm's name. I want you to forensically audit him until there is absolutely nowhere left for him to hide. Find the bodies, Nia, and when you do, we are going to bury him with them. I looked at the glowing screen, then down at the pristine ivory fabric draped across my arms. For the first time in my entire life, I did not feel like a discarded burden. I felt like a weapon fully loaded and finally ready to fire. I paced back and forth behind my living room sofa. The plush velvet fabric brushes against my fingertips as I walk the length of the room and back again. Every time I turn, I look over my shoulder at the sprawling city lights outside my window. My mind is racing, calculating every single angle of Miss Sterling's offer. My own aunt, a billionaire who had been deliberately erased from our family history. And now she was handing me the sword to cut down the very people who had made my life a living hell. I run through the financial models in my head, anticipating Trent's defensive strategies. He is sloppy. Arrogant men always are, but I have to play this perfectly. I cannot let them know I am armed. 2 hours later, I am sitting at the massive mahogany dining table in my parents' estate. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the roasted duck and expensive wine, but the atmosphere is ice cold. This is a mandatory Sunday dinner, a weekly ritual where we are all required to worship at the altar of my parents' success. I am wearing a plain beige sweater, deliberately looking defeated. I am playing the part of the broken scapegoat flawlessly. My mother Valerie raises her wine glass, tapping it with a silver spoon. Her diamond rings catch the light flashing brightly. We have a wonderful announcement, she says, beaming at my sister. Chloe's lifestyle brand is officially entering its next phase of global expansion. Chloe preens, tossing her perfect hair over her shoulder. I keep my face completely blank. Chloe's makeup and lifestyle brand is a massive financial black hole. I know for a fact her warehouses are full of unsold inventory, and her profit margins are non-existent. She spends more on marketing parties than product development. But in this house, optics are reality. If Valerie says the brand is expanding, then everyone must clap. To ensure Chloe has the capital she needs for this massive launch, Valerie continues, we have decided to remortgage the generational estate. Trent has graciously handled all the paperwork. My father Marcus nods in agreement, slicing his duck without a care in the world. My stomach twists violently. The generational estate. The sacred property my mother stole from my aunt 30 years ago. It is a historical landmark in our community, a symbol of our ancestors' hard work. They are risking our entire family legacy to fund cheap lip gloss that nobody wants. Trent leans back in his custom chair, swirling his bourbon. He looks at me with an expression of pure manufactured pity. And what about you, Nia? He asks loudly, ensuring the entire table is paying attention. Any luck finding a job after your little data leak scandal? I look down at my plate, playing the submissive role perfectly. Not yet, Trent, I say quietly. It has been difficult. It has been. He chuckles, a dry, patronizing sound that grates against my spine. I can imagine. You are practically unemployable right now. Nobody wants a liability handling their finances. But because we are family, I am willing to do you a favor. I have a position opening up at my firm. It is just answering phones and logging mail, but it pays minimum wage. It will keep you off the streets. Chloe laughs outright, a sharp mocking sound. Valerie shakes her head, murmuring about how generous Trent is to offer a failure a lifeline. You should take it, Nia, my father says sternly, pointing his fork at me. Trent is going out of his way to help you. Do not be ungrateful. It is the least you can do after embarrassing us. I dig my fingernails into my thighs under the table until they leave crescent-shaped marks. I force myself to smile, a weak, pathetic smile. Thank you, Trent, I say softly. I will think about it. I watch his chest puff up with pride. He thrives on feeling superior. He needs to believe he is the smartest person in the room. He has absolutely no idea that I spent my morning being handed the keys to his professional destruction. I let them inflate their egos, filling the dining room with their delusions of grandeur. I swallow the disrespect with every bite of food, knowing that the trap is already set. After dinner, Valerie waves her manicured hand at me. Clear the plates, Nia, she orders, not even looking at me. Chloe and Trent need to discuss their investment strategies in the parlor. I stand up obediently, stacking the fine china and carrying it through the swinging doors into the massive gourmet kitchen. The caterers have already left, leaving the space silent and gleaming. I set the heavy plates by the sink and turn around to grab a towel. Sitting right there on the white marble island is Trent's iPad. The screen is glowing brightly. He left it completely unlocked. My elite forensic training kicks in instantly. I do not even think. I just step toward the island. I know I should look away, but my eyes lock onto the illuminated screen. It is a banking portal, not a standard client portfolio, but a deeply encrypted back-end financial system. I recognize the software interface immediately. It is the exact platform offshore wealth managers use to bypass federal oversight and hide illicit funds. I scan the numbers, reading the data faster than most people read a book. A wire transfer has just been initiated. The amount is staggering. $500,000 moving from a domestic corporate account to an untraceable shell company in the Cayman Islands. I look closer at the routing numbers, memorizing the digits in seconds. My blood turns to ice. The domestic account does not belong to one of Trent's wealthy anonymous clients. It belongs to Marcus. It is the primary operational fund for my father's regional logistics company. Trent is not just managing our family wealth, he is actively siphoning it. He is bleeding my father's company dry right under his nose while smiling at him over a dinner of roasted duck. He is stealing our money to fund his own secret offshore accounts. I hear heavy footsteps approaching the kitchen doors. It is Trent's confident, arrogant stride. I quickly step away from the marble island, grabbing a wet sponge and turning on the faucet just as the swinging doors push open. Trent pushes through the swinging doors with that familiar, arrogant swagger. I keep my head down, scrubbing a pristine porcelain plate with the wet sponge as if my life depends on it. He walks straight to the marble island and snatches up his iPad. "You missed a spot on that plate, Nia," he says, his voice dripping with condescension. "Try to do at least one thing right today." I do not look up. I just nod, keeping my expression entirely blank until the doors swing shut behind him. I drop the sponge. My hands are shaking, but not from fear. It is pure adrenaline. I turn around and lean against the cold marble counter. My eyes drift to the sprawling gallery wall of framed family portraits in the adjacent hallway. Every single photograph tells the exact same story. Chloe in her expensive cheerleading uniforms, Chloe in her custom prom dresses, Chloe smiling brightly in the center of the frame. And there I am, always pushed to the background, wearing her faded hand-me-downs, half hidden in the shadows. The invisible daughter. I stare at those photos, and the adrenaline settles into a cold, hard focus. Monday morning marks my first official day at Sterling Holdings. Ms. Sterling does not put me in a cubicle. She gives me a corner office with 3 massive monitors and unrestricted access to the most powerful forensic auditing software on the market. I sit down in my ergonomic leather chair, crack my knuckles, and get to work. I type in the routing numbers I memorized from Trent's iPad. Finding offshore money is an art form. Most people think money simply disappears when it crosses international borders, but money always leaves a footprint. You just have to know how to track the heavy steps. I spend the next 4 days mapping out the financial anatomy of my father's regional logistics company. Marcus built that company from the ground up, driving trucks himself, before expanding into a fleet of 200 vehicles. But looking at the internal ledgers now, the company is a hollow shell. Trent has been managing the operational accounts for 3 years. I trace the $500,000 transfer from Sunday night. It bounced through 2 dummy corporations in Delaware before crossing the ocean to a bank in the Cayman Islands. I start running algorithms to unmask the corporate officers of those shell companies. Trent is incredibly careful. He used encrypted IP addresses and virtual private networks to register the entities, but he made one critical mistake. He paid the registration fees using a personal credit card tied to a joint account. I break through the final layer of encryption and pull up the incorporation documents. When the names load on my screen, I physically gasp. Trent is not listed as the registered agent. His name is absolutely nowhere on these documents. The sole owner and chief executive of the offshore shell companies is Chloe. I lean back in my chair, staring at the screen in absolute disbelief. Trent is not just stealing from our father. He is building the perfect scapegoat. By registering the dummy corporations in Chloe's name, he is ensuring that when the money runs out and the federal investigators inevitably come knocking, they will not be looking at him. The paper trail leads directly to his own wife. Chloe will take the fall for federal embezzlement and wire fraud while Trent walks away with millions. A sudden wave of guilt washes over me. She is my sister. We shared a bedroom when we were toddlers. I reach for my phone, dialing her number. I have to warn her. I have to tell her that the man she worships is planning to send her to federal prison. The phone rings twice before I hear her voice. "What do you want, Nia?" Chloe answers. Her tone is sharp and annoyed. "I am in the middle of a lash gloss fitting. I cannot deal with your drama right now." I close my eyes. The image of the mustard yellow suit flashes vividly in my mind. I remember her cruel laughter echoing in the lobby of this very building. I remember her telling me I was a complete disaster who deserved to be thrown out on the pavement. My thumb hovers over the screen. "Never mind, Chloe," I say quietly. I dialed the wrong number. I hang up the phone. She made her bed. She can lie in it. But my father is a different story. Marcus is stubborn and blinded by his own ego, but he built that logistics company with his bare hands. I cannot sit by and let Trent destroy his legacy. I leave my office and drive across town to the logistics headquarters. I find Marcus in his office looking over a stack of printed invoices. He frowns when I walk in, clearly displeased by my unannounced visit. "Dad, we need to talk," I say, closing the door behind me. "It is about Trent and the company finances." Marcus immediately sighs, setting down his pen. Nia, I am not in the mood for this. Trent told me you were resentful about the job offer. It is not about the job, I insist, stepping closer to his desk. Dad Trent is moving your operational funds. I have seen the transfers. The numbers do not add up. You are bleeding capital, and you need to freeze his access to the accounts right now. Marcus stands up so fast his heavy leather chair slams into the wall behind him. His face turns a dark shade of red. How dare you! He shouts, his voice shaking the glass windows of his office. You get fired for a data leak, and now you come into my company trying to accuse Trent of stealing. You are pathetic, Nia. You are so consumed by jealousy because your sister married a successful man and you have absolutely nothing. Dad, please just look at the bank statements, I plead, reaching for the papers on his desk. Do not touch my things, Marcus snarls, slapping my hand away. Trent is a financial genius. He is the man keeping this family rich. He doubled our investment portfolio last year while you were busy destroying your career. Listen to me very carefully, Nia. If you ever disrespect Trent again or try to cause trouble in this family, I will officially disown you. You will not be welcome in my house. Now get out of my office. I stand there looking at the man who is supposed to protect me. He is choosing the white son-in-law over his own black daughter. He is choosing the illusion of wealth over the reality of theft. I slowly lower my hand. I nod once, my face turning to stone. I turn around and walk out of his office, leaving Marcus to his inevitable ruin. The warning is over. The war has officially begun. I left my father's office with the absolute certainty that blood meant nothing. I looked down at my expensive pumps, slide them off my feet, and let them drop to the hardwood floor. I am done walking on eggshells in this family. I am done playing the obedient broken daughter. I step forward barefoot, feeling completely grounded and entirely in control of what happens next. The very next day was our annual Sunday cookout. But calling it a cookout is an insult to the word. It was a highly orchestrated networking gala disguised as a family barbecue hosted on the sprawling, impeccably manicured grounds of my parents' estate. The Atlanta Black elite were out in full force. Politicians, local judges, and real estate moguls mingled on the patio, holding crystal glasses of expensive bourbon. Trent, of course, had invited his own circle. A loud, entitled group of white wealth managers and finance bros who treated our generational family home like an exotic country club. They were loud, obnoxious, and completely oblivious to the space they were taking up. Valerie was in her absolute element. She glided through the crowd in a designer sundress, playing the role of the perfect wealthy matriarch. She thrived on the envy of her peers. And me. My mother handed me a pair of silver tongs the exact moment I walked through the wrought iron gates. She did not ask me how my job hunt was going. She did not offer me a plate of food or a glass of wine. She simply looked me up and down with utter disappointment, told me the catering staff was short-handed, and instructed me to man the grill. She forced me to stand over the hot smoke, flipping steaks and serving plates to Trent's arrogant friends. I smiled politely as they handed me their empty cocktail glasses, treating me exactly like the hired help. Valerie watched from the shaded patio, sipping her champagne, looking incredibly satisfied that I was exactly where she thought I belonged. At the bottom. Working for them. I let them have their fun. I let them think they had broken my spirit. They had no idea that the woman flipping their burgers was currently the lead forensic director at Sterling Holdings, and that I already had the digital blueprints to their complete financial ruin. After 3 hours of serving entitled guests, I desperately needed a moment to breathe. I walked away from the suffocating smoke of the grill and slipped around the back of the pool house where it was quiet. I barely had time to wipe the sweat from my forehead before Chloe cornered me. She stepped out of the shadows wearing a sheer silk cover-up, holding a thick manila envelope. She did not bother with any pleasantries. She marched right up to me and shoved a stapled legal document directly against my chest. "Sign this," Chloe demanded. Her tone was sharp, impatient, and dripping with authority she had not earned. I looked down at the thick, legal jargon printed on the premium paper. I read contracts for a living, so it only took me 5 seconds to understand what I was looking at. It was a binding waiver. a full and irrevocable forfeiture of my remaining 10% stake in the family trust. I stared at my sister, feeling a cold laugh building in the back of my throat. The sheer audacity of this family was staggering. Chloe crossed her arms, tapping her manicured foot against the stone pool deck. Trent needs to secure a massive new investment portfolio tomorrow morning, she explained, reciting a script Trent had clearly fed to her word for word. He needs total liquidity to prove our capital backing. Your 10% is just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. Sign it over so he can finalize the deal. We are doing this for the family, Nia. I looked from the fraudulent document to Chloe's perfectly contoured face. She looked so proud of herself. She had absolutely no idea that she was the sole legal owner of Trent's offshore shell companies. She had no idea her beloved husband was actively preparing to leave her holding the bag for federal wire fraud and embezzlement. I could have warned her right then. I could have laid out the entire forensic trail and saved her from a federal indictment. But I looked at her dismissive glare. I remembered the mustard yellow suit. I remembered her vicious laughter in the lobby of Sterling Holdings when Trent spilled scalding coffee on my chest. She was not a victim. She was a willing participant in my destruction. I handed the document back to her, letting it drop from my fingers so she had to scramble to catch it before it hit the wet stone. Absolutely not, I said, my voice dead calm. I am not signing over a single dime of my money to fund Trent's ghost accounts. Chloe gasped, her face contorting with immediate rage. You selfish little witch, she spat. Before she could raise her voice to scream for our mother, a heavy hand clamped down hard on my wrist. Trent stepped out from behind the corner of the pool house. He must have been standing there the entire time, waiting to see if I would comply. His grip was brutal, his fingers digging painfully into my skin and twisting my arm just enough to make me wince. His charming, friendly facade was completely gone. The mask had slipped, revealing the cold, predatory thief underneath. He leaned in so close I could smell the expensive scotch and cigars on his breath. You are going to sign that paper right now, Nia, he whispered, his voice a razor-sharp threat that sent a chill down my spine. You are unemployed. You are a disgrace. You have absolutely no power here. If you do not pick up a pen and sign this waiver, I will personally destroy what is left of your pathetic life. I will ruin your credit score by midnight, and I will have my lawyers evict you from your apartment by Monday morning. Do not test me. I yank my arm out of his grasp with a violent jerk. My wrist throbs with a dull, radiating pain where his fingers dug into my skin, but I refuse to rub it. I refuse to give him the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. I stare right back into his cold, calculating eyes. You cannot evict someone who does not owe you a single dime, Trent, I say, keeping my voice dangerously low and steady. I spin around on my bare heels, leaving him standing by the pool house. His face twists into an ugly, furious scowl as I walk away. As I march back toward the crowded patio, Valerie intercepts me. She shoves a heavy silver bucket against my chest, nearly knocking the wind out of me. Stop wandering off and go get more ice from the pantry, she snaps, glaring at the empty bucket. The guests are waiting, and you are embarrassing me by standing around doing nothing. I take the bucket without a single word of protest. The heavy glass patio doors slide shut behind me, instantly muting the loud chatter, the laughter, and the clinking crystal glasses of the high society cookout. The air conditioning inside the mansion is a sharp shock to my skin after the sweltering Atlanta heat. I walk through the sprawling gourmet kitchen, the polished marble floors, cool beneath my bare feet. I had kicked off my heels hours ago, refusing to break my ankles for people who treat me like a servant. The catering staff is busy outside, leaving the massive kitchen completely deserted. I head toward the walk-in pantry, a large temperature-controlled room hidden behind a heavy oak door at the back of the room. As I reach for the brass handle, a voice stops me dead in my tracks. It is muffled, coming from inside the pantry, but the arrogant cadence is unmistakable. Trent. I freeze completely, my hand hovering mere inches from the brass handle. He must have slipped through the side entrance right after our confrontation by the pool. He is not talking to a client. His tone is too loose, too cocky, too intimate. I lean my ear against the thick wood, my breath catching in my throat as I listen. "Come on, baby, just be patient for a few more weeks," Trent croons into the phone. I am looking at the final transfer schedules right now. I have got these bougie black folks completely wrapped around my finger. They are so desperate to look rich and elite that they do not even read the paperwork they sign. My blood turns to ice. I hold my breath, terrified that making even the slightest sound will alert him to my presence. A pause follows as the woman on the other end speaks. I press my ear harder against the heavy oak door, straining to catch every single word. "You know I absolutely hate her." Trent laughs, a cruel, guttural sound that makes my skin crawl. "Chloe is practically brainless. She just signed the dummy corporation papers this morning. I am putting the entire offshore shell structure directly in her name. When the federal investigators finally catch on, she's going to take the fall for all of it, and we are going to be sitting in a luxury villa in Monaco. Just pack your bags, Lauren. I will drain the last of Marcus's operational accounts by Friday afternoon. They will be completely bankrupt before they even realize the money is gone." Another pause stretches out. When Trent speaks again, his voice drops lower, turning vicious and incredibly ugly. "I am sick of pretending to respect them. They think they are so elite, but they are just a bunch of stupid, ignorant targets." He drops a horrific racial slur, a vile word that hits my ears like a physical strike. It is a word steeped in centuries of violence and hatred, thrown casually from the mouth of the man my father trusts with our entire family legacy. The absolute vitriol in his voice makes my stomach churn with severe nausea. He is not just stealing from my family. He deeply despises us. He views my parents, my sister, and every single successful black person out on that patio as nothing more than cattle to be slaughtered for his own amusement and profit. My father defends this man. My mother worships this man. And he stands in their house drinking their expensive liquor, calling them the most degrading name imaginable to his white mistress. The sheer shock of the venom in his voice makes my hands tremble violently. My fingers slip against the smooth condensation on the outside of the silver bucket. I try to catch it, to press it against my chest to stop it from falling, but I am a fraction of a second too late. The bucket hits the marble floor with a deafening metallic crash. It sounds like a gunshot echoing through the quiet kitchen. Ice cubes scatter everywhere, sliding across the polished tiles like broken glass. The voice inside the pantry goes dead silent. The heavy oak door flies open instantly, nearly hitting me in the face. Trent stands in the doorway. He is clutching a cheap plastic burner phone in his right hand. The color drains completely from his face as his eyes lock onto mine. He looks down at the silver bucket rolling across the floor and then back up to my face. The realization hits him like a runaway freight train. He knows exactly what I heard. The offshore accounts, the mistress named Lauren, the dummy corporations in Chloe's name, the devastating racial slur. His panic instantly morphs into pure, unadulterated rage. His eyes go completely dark, shedding every ounce of the polished wealth manager persona he wears for the world. "You sneaking little rat," he hisses, his voice a lethal whisper. Before I can even take a single step backward, Trent lunges at me. He grabs me by the throat, slamming my back against the hard marble wall of the kitchen. His fingers dig deeply into my windpipe, cutting off my air. The burner phone drops from his hand, clattering against the floor tiles. He presses his heavy forearm against my chest, pinning me in place. His face is mere inches from mine, his teeth bared like a cornered animal ready to kill. I do not scream. I do not panic. Years of surviving in this toxic house have trained me to detach my emotions when under fire. I bring my knee up sharply, driving it straight into his thigh with every ounce of strength I possess. Trent grunts in sudden pain, his heavy forearm slipping just an inch. That inch is all I need. I twist my shoulders violently, breaking his hold and sidestepping his bulky frame. Before he can regain his balance, I drop to the floor. My fingers close around the cheap plastic of his burner phone. He lunges again, reaching for me with blind desperation, but I am already moving. I swing my arm in a wide, violent arc and smash the phone directly into the edge of the solid granite countertop. The impact is deafening. The plastic casing shatters instantly. I bring it down a second time, obliterating the screen and sending shards of cheap glass and broken microchips scattering across the polished stone. The device is completely destroyed, holding none of the secrets he was just whispering into it. A slow, continuous pan from left to right captures this exact moment as I deliberately turn my back on his furious, gasping form. I walk slowly across the length of the massive gourmet kitchen, my bare feet silent against the marble. I stop to gaze out the floor-to-ceiling window. My reflection is perfectly visible in the thick glass overlapping with the high society party continuing outside, oblivious to the war happening in here. I look at my own eyes in the reflection. I look calm. I look untouchable. The loud crashing of the phone against the granite acts like a dinner bell. The swinging doors fly open. Marcus, Valerie, and Chloe rush into the kitchen, their designer clothes rustling as they take in the scene. Trent shifts gears with the terrifying speed of a seasoned sociopath. The predatory monster vanishes completely, replaced instantly by a shaken victim. He stumbles back, leaning against the island and clutching his thigh. He points a trembling finger at me, his face the very picture of distressed disbelief. "She has completely lost her mind, Marcus." He gasps, his voice shaking with manufactured trauma. "She just had a psychotic break. I walked in here to get more ice for the guests, and she attacked me like a wild animal. She tried to steal my private business phone, and when I stopped her, she smashed it." Chloe lets out a dramatic shriek and rushes to her husband. She throws her arms around him, checking his face and chest as if he just survived a brutal mugging in a dark alley. Valerie stares at the shattered pieces of plastic on the granite counter, and then turns her venomous gaze directly on me. Marcus stands tall, his chest puffed out, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. None of them ask me if I am okay. None of them ask for my side of the story. The verdict is already decided before the trial even begins. "What is wrong with you?" Valerie spits, stepping toward me. Her manicured hands are balled into tight fists. "You are an ungrateful, vicious liability. You cannot stand seeing your sister happy. You cannot stand seeing a successful man providing for this family while you amount to absolutely nothing. You are a jealous, pathetic failure." "Dad, she attacked him!" Chloe cries out, burying her face in Trent's shoulder. Trent wraps a protective arm around her, looking at me with a smirk hidden just beneath his faux trauma. "She is dangerous. We need to call security and have her thrown out." Marcus points a heavy finger at me. "I offered you a lifeline," he growls, his voice vibrating with absolute disgust. "Trent offered you a job out of the goodness of his heart, and this is how you repay him. By destroying his property and assaulting him in our home. You are a disgrace to the family name Nia." Valerie steps into my personal space, her perfume suffocating me. She points to the floor directly in front of Trent. "You are going to get down on your knees right now," she orders, her voice a lethal whisper. "You are going to get on your knees and apologize to Trent for this unprovoked attack. You are going to beg for his forgiveness. And then you are going to pack your bags and leave my property forever." For 10 seconds, the kitchen is dead silent. They wait for me to break. They wait for the tears, the apologies, the submission they have extracted from me my entire life. Instead, a sound bubbles up from my chest. It starts as a quiet chuckle and quickly turns into a full, deep, genuine laugh. I throw my head back and laugh right in their faces. The sound echoes against the marble countertops, bouncing off the high ceilings. They stare at me as if I have sprouted a second head. My laughter is not hysterical. It is the sound of absolute liberation. They are so remarkably, incredibly blind. I stop laughing and look at Trent. His smirk is gone, replaced by a flicker of genuine uncertainty. I reach into the pocket of my beige sweater. I do not pull out a tissue to wipe away tears. I pull out my new corporate card. It is a heavy, matte black metal card stamped with the unmistakable silver logo of Sterling Holdings. I toss the card onto the granite counter. It lands with a heavy, satisfying clink right next to the shattered pieces of Trent's cheap burner phone. "Buy yourself a new phone, Trent," I say, my voice ringing with total authority. "Put it on my tab. I hear they sell decent burner phones down at the corner store for guys who need to call their mistresses named Lauren." Trent's face instantly turns the color of ash. Chloe stops crying, looking from the black card to her husband in confusion. Marcus and Valerie stare at the Sterling Holdings logo, their eyes widening in sudden shock. They all know exactly what that logo means. They know it represents the billionaire aunt they erased from history. I do not need your minimum wage pity job, Trent, I say, stepping past them toward the swinging doors. And I certainly do not need to stay in a house funded by stolen money. Enjoy the rest of your cookout. I push through the doors, leaving them standing in stunned, paralyzed silence. I walk out into the humid Atlanta air, my bare feet hitting the pavement as I leave the generational estate behind me forever. The morning air in my apartment felt thick, a suffocating contrast to the cold, clinical precision of the forensic audits I had been running on Trent's digital footprint. I grabbed my phone, ready to log into my bank account to pay a lingering utility bill, but the application screen flashed a jarring crimson alert. Access denied. I blinked, assuming it was a technical glitch, and tried my secondary credit union account. Frozen. My chest tightened. I switched to my investment app, the one holding my meager savings from my years of working as a data analyst. That too showed a zero balance, with a status update, account status under review, due to fraud investigation. My breath hitched. Trent. He hadn't just been posturing by the pool, he had moved with the speed of a cornered rat. Using the power of attorney my father had foolishly granted him years ago, a document that covered the management of certain family legacy assets, he had essentially declared war. He was painting me as a criminal, to isolate me from my own life, to render me powerless before I could even make a move against him. My phone buzzed again, this time with a push notification from my personal email. A formal cease and desist letter, drafted on the letterhead of Trent's firm, had just landed in my inbox. I opened the PDF, my eyes scanning the dense, threatening legalese. The document was a masterpiece of manufactured malice. It alleged with blatant, perjurious detail that I had been fired from my previous firm due to a pattern of illicit embezzlement, and that my current employment at Sterling Holdings was obtained under false pretenses. It demanded I cease all activities at Sterling Holdings and surrender my digital access credentials, claiming my presence there constituted a security threat. It was a total fabrication. It was a calculated defamatory strike meant to destroy my professional reputation before I could finish unraveling his offshore schemes. He was trying to get me fired, blacklisted, and potentially prosecuted by the very firm I was now protecting. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I picked up my phone and sent a concise, encrypted message to Ms. Sterling's private line. I didn't need to explain. I knew she would have already received a copy of that fraudulent letter. Within minutes, my phone rang. Ms. Sterling's assistant, a woman whose efficiency was as legendary as her employers, told me to come to the penthouse office immediately. The drive to the office was a blur. My mind was a furnace of cold, hard calculations. Trent thought he had successfully cornered me, turning the family's wealth against me and using the legal system as a weapon. He had no idea that I had spent the last week embedding canary traps into the offshore shell corporation files he thought were secure. Every time he attempted to access those funds, he was leaving a deeper, more incriminating trail of evidence that linked him, not just Chloe, to the source of the money. I walked into the lobby of Sterling Holdings, the glass and steel, reflecting the sharpened focus of a woman who was no longer a victim. I bypassed the receptionist, heading straight for the elevator that required biometric clearance. As the lift ascended to the top floor, I felt the familiar, sharp clarity of battle. Ms. Sterling was standing by the panoramic window when I entered, her silhouette framed by the towering Atlanta skyline. She didn't turn around when the doors slid open. She simply gestured to the sprawling mahogany desk behind her. On the desk lay a thick, leather-bound dossier. "I've seen the letter, Nia," she said, her voice devoid of emotion, though her eyes, when she finally turned, were alight with a terrifying, beautiful intelligence. "It's a complete lie," I stated, walking toward the desk. "Trent is attempting to sabotage my position here to protect his own embezzlement of my father's logistics company. He's using Chloe's identity for dummy corporations. I have the IP logs and the routing numbers for the transfers." Ms. Sterling didn't respond to the evidence yet. Instead, she stepped forward and slid the dossier across the desk toward me. He didn't just send that letter to my legal department, Nia. He sent a copy to every major stakeholder in the city. He's trying to destroy you publicly, but he forgot one thing. I opened the dossier. Inside were not legal documents, but a comprehensive surveillance report on Trent. It contained photos of him meeting with his mistress Lauren at a high-end bistro, copies of the encrypted communications he'd been sending, and most importantly, the direct digital link between his personal devices and the dummy corporations. He took the bait, Ms. Sterling said, a small, predatory smile touching her lips. By initiating this legal strike against you, he had to provide an affidavit under oath as part of the filing. He's now on record swearing to the facts of your alleged crimes, which, as we know, are provably false. He's effectively signed his own confession. He provided the necessary evidence of intent and malice for us to completely bypass the standard audit. She leaned back, her composure radiating absolute power. He thought he was silencing you. He thought he was playing a game of chess with a pawn. He has no idea he's already been checkmated. Now we own him. I looked through the pages of the dossier. Every illicit wire transfer, every offshore account, and every interaction with his mistress was documented with pristine accuracy. Trent hadn't just tried to frame me. He had unwittingly given Ms. Sterling the keys to dismantle his entire existence. I want him to believe he's winning, I said, my voice steady. I want him to think that I'm unraveling. If he thinks I'm desperate, he'll get even more reckless with the remaining funds. He's planning to drain the final accounts by Friday. Then let him, Ms. Sterling replied, her eyes burning with that familiar ancient fury. You have the forensic tools to ensure those transfers are rerouted, don't you? I can reroute them into a blind trust that he can't access, but that will trigger an immediate alert on his end, I countered. I need 48 hours to make sure the evidence is so deeply embedded that even his lawyers won't be able to scrub it. Take 72, she countered, closing the dossier. And Nia, don't let his pathetic attempts at intimidation rattle you. You are a Sterling and we do not break. As I left her office, the cold weight of his threats started to dissolve, replaced by the lethal anticipation of the trap. I walked toward the elevators, feeling a sense of satisfaction that made my previous panic seem like a distant, irrelevant memory. Trent had built his tower of lies on sand, and I was holding the tide. When I stepped out of the building, my phone was once again flooded with notifications, a deluge of messages from Troy, Valerie, and my father. They were demanding I resign, demanding I apologize, and threatening to involve the police if I didn't vacate my office at Sterling Holdings by the end of the day. I paused on the sidewalk, the city bustling around me, indifferent to the destruction I was about to unleash. I opened the group chat, the one where my father had recently threatened to kick me out of the family for disrespecting the man who was bleeding him dry, and began to type. I didn't choose the war, but I was certainly going to be the one to finish it. The first breadcrumb I would drop was meant to be small, just enough to lead them into the darkness where they thought I was trapped. I sent a single calculated response. I'm clearing out my office as you requested. We can talk about everything at the upcoming gala. It was a lie, of course. I wasn't clearing anything out. I was preparing to bring the house down. Trent would interpret my message as weakness, as capitulation. He would relax his guard, thinking he had won, and in that split second of arrogance, he would make the final move that would land him in a federal holding cell. I walked to my car, the late afternoon sun catching the sharp edges of my reflection in the building's glass, and I realized that for the first time in my life, I felt entirely dangerously alive. The game was mine to win. I sit in the back of the armored security car as it speeds down the interstate toward the private airfield. The plush leather interior is completely silent, shielding me from the noise of the outside world. If a camera were capturing this exact moment, it would start from a high-angle shot looking down at a solitary woman surrounded by a sea of corporate documents. But as I delve deeper into the dossier, that imaginary lens would slowly crane down to eye level, meeting my unwavering gaze in the reflection of the tinted window. I am no longer looking up at anyone. I am looking straight ahead, calculating the exact trajectory of my family's impending downfall. I flip past the records of my father's illegal political donations and my mother's vile written agreements to have me institutionalized. I thought I had seen the worst of their depravity. I thought the absolute bottom had been reached. I am wrong. Tucked into the very back pocket of the heavy leather folder is a separate manila envelope sealed with red wax. I break the seal and pull out a stack of original property deeds and real estate transfer logs. The address printed at the top of the first page makes my heart stop for a fraction of a second. 4200 Oakwood Drive. It is the historical estate of my late grandmother. It is not just a piece of residential property. It is a cornerstone of the Atlanta Black elite community, a sacred landmark where civil rights leaders once gathered to strategize in secret. It features original wraparound porches, ancient weeping willows, and a library filled with first edition books. When my grandmother passed away, her dying wish was for the estate to be placed in a permanent preservation trust, ensuring it would remain in our family for generations to come. It was the only place where I had ever felt truly safe as a child. I read the legal descriptions on the transfer documents, and a cold, hollow rage begins to spread through my chest. Trent did not just take out a second mortgage to secure capital. He and Chloe completely shattered the preservation trust. They secretly transferred the deed in its entirety out of my grandmother's name and directly into Apex Holdings LLC, the very same offshore shell company Trent has been using to funnel stolen money out of my father's logistics firm. And right there at the bottom of the page is Chloe's signature. She signed the authorization as the primary trustee. She willingly handed over the most sacred piece of our family history to her husband. I cross-referenced the dates of the deed transfer with the financial statements Ms. Sterling provided. I need to know why they needed that specific property. The estate was appraised at over $8 million. The day the deed was transferred, an $8 million line of credit was opened against the property by Apex Holdings. I traced the routing numbers for that massive withdrawal. The money did not go into a business venture. It did not go into the logistics firm. It went directly to a series of offshore bank accounts linked to high-stakes underground casinos in Macau and Las Vegas. Trent has a massive gambling addiction. The polished, wealthy finance bro who turned his nose up at me and treated my family home like his personal country club is nothing but a degenerate gambler. He racked up $8 million in illicit debt, and instead of facing the consequences, he manipulated his clueless wife into signing over my grandmother's legacy to pay off his bookies. He desecrated the only pure thing left in our family to save his own skin. I flipped to the final page of the envelope. It is a default notice generated by the local tax assessor and the primary lending bank. Apex Holdings secured that line of credit with a high-interest balloon loan. The final maturity date is printed in bold red ink. Tomorrow at noon. Trent never had any intention of paying the loan back. He structured the debt so it would explode right as he was making his final exit. He knew he was fleeing to Monaco with his mistress. He planned to be thousands of miles away sipping champagne while the bank foreclosed on the shell company. Once the clock strikes 12 tomorrow, the loan officially defaults. The bank will immediately seize the property and list the historical estate for public auction. A dark, terrifying smile slowly spreads across my face. The absolute irony of the situation is staggering. My parents have absolutely no idea. Right at this very moment, Valerie is likely standing on the manicured lawn of that estate, holding a crystal glass of champagne, directing the catering staff for their upcoming summer gala. Marcus is probably in my grandmother's library smoking a cigar and bragging to his friends about his vast wealth. They think they are the untouchable kings and queens of Atlanta high society. They are standing in a house they no longer own. By tomorrow afternoon, they will be legally trespassing on bank property. They are about to be homeless. They threw me out into the cold, labeled me a failure and a disgrace, and plotted to lock me in a psychiatric ward to protect their image. Meanwhile, the golden son-in-law they worshipped has literally sold the roof over their heads to pay for his gambling habits. I carefully place the documents back into the manila envelope. The trap is perfectly set. I do not need to lift a single finger to destroy my parents. Their own arrogance and blind trust in Trent have already done the work for me. I just need to make sure Trent does not escape the blast radius. The security car slows down as we approach the guarded entrance of the private airfield. The driver flashes a badge and the heavy iron gates swing open. The sleek bodies of private luxury jets gleam under the tall security lights. I instruct the driver to pull up directly parallel to the tarmac, where a specific charter plane is fueling up. Through the windshield, I see him. Trent is pacing near the boarding stairs, nervously checking his phone. He looks frantic, his usual polished composure completely shattered. He is desperately trying to finalize the last wire transfer before he boards the plane. He has no idea I have already rerouted the funds into a biometric lock, causing his entire financial network to freeze. I step out of the car, the humid night air hitting my face. I slam the heavy door shut, making a loud echoing sound across the quiet tarmac. Trent freezes. He turns his head slowly, his eyes widening in pure terror as he sees me walking toward him. I hold the dossier in one hand, my heels clicking rhythmically against the pavement. The game is over. "You should not be here, Nia." Trent stammers, his voice cracking as he desperately tries to maintain his polished alpha male facade. He points a shaking finger at me, glancing nervously at the pilot waiting near the steps. "This is a restricted area. You need to turn around and go back to your little data desk before you get hurt." I do not stop walking. The distance between us closes, the visual field narrowing and expanding rhythmically, pulling the background in and pushing it away to match the heavy accelerating thud of my own heartbeat. I toss the thick leather dossier onto the tarmac directly at his feet. It slides open, revealing the printed deed transfer of the Harrington estate. His eyes dart to the paper. The color completely drains from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost in the harsh security lights. Apex Holdings, LLC. I say my words coming faster now, a relentless driving cadence that leaves him no room to breathe or think. An offshore shell company registered in the Caymans. You used my mother's signature, bypassed the Permanent Preservation Trust, and leveraged an $8 million line of credit against my grandmother's home to pay off your underground bookies. And tomorrow at noon, that balloon loan defaults. The property goes to public auction and your entire facade collapses. He steps back, bumping hard against the aluminum stairs of his chartered jet. He pulls out his phone, his thumbs frantically swiping across the screen. "You do not know what you are talking about. The transfers are secure. My accounts are locked," I finish for him, my voice slicing through the humid air. "Biometrically sealed and flagged for manual fraud verification by the Federal Tax Authority. Every dollar you tried to root out of my father's company tonight has been frozen in a holding account. You are broke, Trent. You have no flight clearance, no offshore paradise, and by tomorrow afternoon my parents will know exactly who sold their legacy out from under them." He stares at his phone screen, his mouth opening and closing silently as the red access denied banners flash across his banking applications. The suave, arrogant predator who humiliated me by the pool just days ago is entirely gone, replaced by a cornered, sweating coward. He looks at the plane, then at me, then at the approaching headlights of airport security responding to the alert I triggered on my way in. He does not stay to argue. He drops his leather duffel bag onto the tarmac, shoves past me, and sprints toward his parked rental SUV. I watch the tires smoke as he violently reverses and speeds away into the night. I do not chase him. I have no need to. A rat in a maze only runs until it hits a dead end. I return to the back of the security car, instructing the driver to take me home. The trap surrounding the estate is perfectly set, but Trent's panicked flight tells me he is not going to simply surrender. He is a narcissist backed into a corner, and a narcissist will always try to burn the world down to save himself. Back in the quiet sanctuary of my apartment, I brew a pot of dark roast coffee and set up my command center at the kitchen island. Multiple monitors glow in the dim light, displaying the live network traffic of the logistics company, Ms. Sterling's secure servers, and the local county tax portal. I need to monitor Trent's digital footprint to ensure he does not have a secondary escape route hidden in the firm's legacy systems. Hours pass. The city outside my window grows completely silent. It is past 2 in the morning when a sudden jarring anomaly flashes across my secondary screen. It is a high-priority alert from a personal network monitor I set up years ago, pinging an outdated banking application. I frown, pulling up the alert. It is tied to a dormant student checking account I opened during my freshman year of college, an account I have not used or thought about in nearly a decade. The balance just updated $500,000. My blood runs completely cold. I furiously tap the keys, tracing the origin of the routing number. The deposit did not come from Trent's personal accounts. It came directly from the logistics company's primary payroll reserve. He used an old buried administrative backdoor, a ghost token he must have created months ago, for an emergency exactly like this to bypass the frozen accounts. I see the timestamps. He did not just initiate the transfer, he attached a fabricated digital paper trail. The logs are meticulously forged to look like I have been siphoning these funds for the past 6 months, using my recent forensic audit as a cover to hide my tracks. He is establishing a narrative. He is making it look like I discovered his minor embezzlements and decided to use the chaos to steal $500,000 for myself. He realized the auction of the Harrington estate tomorrow would expose his massive debt, bringing the federal authorities straight to his door. He needed a scapegoat to take the fall for the corporate theft immediately, someone with the technical expertise to pull off a cyber heist, someone with a clear motive for revenge against the family. He needed me to take the blame so he could negotiate a plea or vanish in the confusion. My fingers fly across the keyboard. I need to freeze the college account, block the incoming transfer, and send the time-stamped firewall logs directly to Ms. Sterling's legal team to prove the hack originated from Trent's burner IP address. The progress bar for my data compilation crawls across the screen. 50%, 60%. Then my phone vibrates on the desk, a blocked number. I answer it, keeping my eyes locked on the monitor. "You think you are so smart, Nia?" Trent's voice hisses through the speaker, breathless and manic. "You think you can take everything from me? I just tipped off the Financial Crimes Unit, an anonymous whistleblower reporting a massive corporate theft. They have your IP address. They have your bank records. Let us see how powerful you feel in a federal holding cell." The line goes dead. 75%. I type a frantic encrypted SOS to Ms. Sterling's head of security, attaching the raw data packets proving Trent's final hack. I hit send just as the progress bar hits 90%. Heavy boots thud against the hardwood floor of the hallway outside my apartment. The sound is aggressive, fast, and multiplied by several people moving in tactical formation. 95%. My heart hammers wildly against my ribs. I reach out to press the final execution command to lock the dormant account. The heavy metallic sound of fists slamming against my front door shatters the silence of the apartment. The wood frame shudders under the force of the blows. Police open up. The violent pounding against my door vibrates through the floorboards, but I do not flinch. I do not scramble to delete files or destroy hard drives. My work is already finished. I reach for the bottle of Cabernet sitting on the kitchen island, pour a generous measure into a long-stemmed crystal glass, and walk calmly toward the entryway. I slide the deadbolt open. The door bursts inward. Two uniformed officers and a plainclothes detective push their way into my modest apartment, their hands hovering near their duty belts. But they are not alone. Filing in right behind the police, treating this raid like a VIP viewing event, is my family. Trent stands near the back of the pack, his arms crossed over his chest, sporting a look of triumphant manufactured pity. He actually brought them here. He orchestrated this entire spectacle to ensure my humiliation was a family affair. Marcus steps inside, shaking his head with exaggerated disgust, playing the role of the heartbroken patriarch to absolute perfection. Valerie follows him, her eyes scanning my apartment with unconcealed contempt. And then there is Chloe. She has her phone raised high, the attached ring light casting a harsh, blinding glow across my living room. She is speaking directly to the camera, broadcasting this raid on Instagram Live to her thousands of followers. "I cannot even believe I am showing you guys this right now," Chloe says to her screen, her voice dripping with fake sorrow. "My own sister. We just found out she has been stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from our family business. The police are literally arresting her right now. It is just so tragic how greed can completely destroy a person." The detective steps forward, flashing a gold badge. "Nia Harrington, we have a warrant to search these premises and a warrant for your arrest on charges of grand larceny and corporate embezzlement." Before I can even process the detective's words, Valerie lunges forward. She closes the distance between us in two rapid steps, raising her hand high. Her palm strikes my cheek with a sharp, resounding crack that echoes off the walls of the apartment. My head snaps to the side from the sheer force of the blow. The sting radiates across my skin, hot and sharp, but my grip on the crystal stemware does not falter. Not a single drop of the dark red wine spills. "You are a thief!" Valerie spits, her face contorted with a rage so profound it borders on madness. "You are a miserable, jealous thief and a complete disgrace to the Harrington legacy. After everything your father and I have done for you, after we kept a roof over your head and tolerated your failures, you decide to steal from us. You steal from your own family to fund your pathetic, bitter existence. We should have locked you away years ago." I slowly turn my head back to face her. The camera pushes in tight on my hands. My fingers are steady, perfectly relaxed against the delicate glass. I gently swirl the wine, watching the crimson liquid coat the crystal in smooth, methodical circles. The view pans slowly up my arm, tracking past the reddening mark, blooming on my left cheek, until it settles squarely on my face. I am smiling. It is not a smile of defense, nor is it a smile of defeat. It is a chilling, entirely unfazed smile of absolute certainty. I do not look at Valerie. I look right past her, locking eyes directly with Trent over her shoulder. His smug, victorious grin falters for a fraction of a second. He expected tears. He expected me to drop to my knees and beg for mercy. He expected me to scream about my innocence while the police dragged me away. He certainly did not expect me to stand here looking like a predator watching its prey willingly lock itself inside a cage. By bringing Chloe here to broadcast this on a live public forum, Trent has unwittingly provided an unalterable time-stamped video record of his own malicious frame-up. "Are you done, Valerie?" I ask, my voice unnervingly quiet, carrying a razor-sharp edge that cuts straight through the tension in the room. Valerie steps back, momentarily disarmed by my complete lack of panic. The detective clears his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the chaotic family theater playing out in the middle of his crime scene. He steps between me and my mother, pulling a heavy pair of steel handcuffs from his tactical belt. The metallic clinking sound snaps the room back to reality. "Nia Harrington." The detective says, his tone shifting into strict professional protocol. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." I do not move. I bring the glass to my lips and take a slow, deliberate sip of the Cabernet. Outside my apartment window, the flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers are suddenly washed out by a blinding flood of brilliant white halogen headlights. The screech of heavy, high-performance tires echoing from the street below pierces the night air. Multiple heavy vehicles brake abruptly against the curb. The sound of thick, armored car doors slamming shut in perfect unison reverberates up the exterior walls of the building. Chloe lowers her phone slightly, her brow furrowing in confusion. Trent steps toward the window, pulling the blind back to look down at the street. His face goes entirely white. The rhythmic, purposeful thud of synchronized footsteps echoes up the stairwell. The heavy footfalls are fast, authoritative, and growing louder by the second. The detective pauses, the steel handcuffs suspended midair, as the crowded mass of bodies in my doorway is suddenly and forcefully parted. 3 men dressed in immaculate, custom-tailored $1,000 suits stride into my cramped living room. They move with the lethal precision of apex predators, physically brushing the police officers and my father aside to clear a wide path. Stepping through the newly cleared threshold, flanked by her elite team of corporate litigators and radiating an aura of absolute terrifying power, is Ms. Sterling. The air in the room shifts instantly, the aggressive energy of the police raid neutralized by the overwhelming weight of corporate authority. The detective blinks, momentarily stunned, as the 3 litigators fan out in a highly coordinated tactical maneuver. The lead attorney, a man with sharp features and a voice like cracking ice, steps directly between me and the detective, physically blocking the handcuffs from coming anywhere near my wrists. "We represent Nia Harrington," the attorney states, his tone ringing with absolute, unyielding command. "And you, detective, are about to execute a falsely sworn warrant based on a fabricated, malicious tip." The detective frowns, his hand dropping to his side. We have digital evidence of a wire transfer. You have a digital illusion, the attorney interrupts, snapping open a sleek leather briefcase. He pulls out a thick-bound stack of documents bearing heavy embossed federal seals. He shoves the paperwork directly into the detective's chest. These are federally authenticated cybersecurity logs procured under direct oversight of the Banking Commission. The $500,000 transferred into my client's dormant checking account did not originate from her device. The IP address traces directly to a secure Wi-Fi network at the Atlanta private charter terminal. It matches the exact real-time geolocation of a laptop registered to that man. The lawyer points a perfectly manicured finger straight at Trent. Trent's face drains of all color, transforming into a sickly, translucent white. He stumbles backward, bumping hard against my kitchen counter. Furthermore, the second litigator adds, pulling another set of stamped documents from his own briefcase. The offshore shell company that initiated the embezzlement of the logistics firm Apex Holdings LLC is not a phantom entity. It is legally registered, signed, and authorized under the name of Chloe Harrington. A sharp, strangled gasp escapes Chloe. Her hands tremble so violently that her phone slips from her grip. The device clatters against the hardwood floor, the screen cracking, but the Instagram live feed continues to broadcast audio to her thousands of followers. The entire city is listening to the destruction of her carefully curated life. No, she whispers, staring at Trent with wide, horrified eyes. Trent told me those were tax-exempt trust documents for our future baby. I just signed where he told me to sign. The detective reads the federal seals on the documents, his eyes scanning the irrefutable proof of the IP addresses and the bank routing numbers. The air grows thick with a heavy, dangerous realization. He looks at me completely unharmed and utterly calm, and then slowly turns his gaze toward Trent. The two uniformed officers instinctively mirror his movement. Their hands drop away from their utility belts, their stances shifting seamlessly from aggressive intrusion to blocking the doorway. They are no longer looking at me as a suspect. They are looking at Trent as a flight risk. Realizing that his brilliant frame-up has just handed the police federal proof of his own crimes, Trent completely loses his mind. The polished, arrogant facade evaporates, leaving behind a cornered, desperate rat. He lunges forward, lowering his shoulder to violently shove past the nearest uniformed officer in a frantic bid for the hallway. He does not make it. Marcus, whose face has morphed from the arrogant patriarch to a man who suddenly understands he is staring down the barrel of a federal indictment, and absolute financial ruin, shoots his hand out. He grabs Trent by the collar of his expensive designer suit, lifting him slightly and slamming him brutally against the drywall. "You son of a—" Marcus snarls, the veins popping dangerously in his neck, his voice a low, terrifying growl. "You set us up. You stole my company. You sold my mother's estate." "Let him go!" Valerie screams. It is a loud, piercing, hysterical shriek that echoes painfully in the cramped space. She lunges forward, trying to pull Marcus off her precious golden boy. "It is a setup. Let him go. Nia did this. She manufactured these fake logs to destroy us." Valerie turns her frantic, flushed face toward the detective, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She is a thief and a disgrace to the Harrington legacy. Arrest her. She is trying to ruin her sister's life." The room freezes at her outburst. Marcus holds Trent pinned against the wall, Trent gasping for air, Chloe weeping on the floor next to her broadcasting phone. The police stand utterly bewildered by the escalating family warfare. Then Ms. Sterling moves. She has stood in perfect, terrifying silence since crossing the threshold, allowing her lawyers to dismantle the police raid. Now she steps forward. The police part for her, instinctively sensing an authority that supersedes badges and warrants. She walks slowly, her heels clicking against the floorboards with a measured, predatory rhythm. She stops mere inches from Valerie. For the first time seeing them face to face in the harsh apartment lighting, the hidden truth snaps into sharp, undeniable focus. The bone structure, the shape of the jaw, the fierce, unyielding fury burning in their eyes. The resemblance is suddenly staggering. Ms. Sterling looks dead into Valerie's frantic, hyperventilating face. The silence in the room becomes absolute heavy and suffocating. "Hello, little sister," Ms. Sterling says, her voice smooth, cold, and utterly devastating. The camera dollies in tracking my movement as I step smoothly away from the kitchen island. The chaos behind me blurs into soft focus. Marcus restraining a struggling Trent. The police moving in with their handcuffs. Valerie grasping her chest as if she has just been shot. Chloe sobbing into her hands. I walk slowly toward the lens, the rhythm of my steps perfectly matching the pounding, victorious drumbeat in my chest. I look directly into the camera, breaking the fourth wall. A cold, triumphant smile plays on my lips. The trap has not just snapped shut. It has buried them alive. The camera breaks its static hold, executing a slow, sweeping arc around my body as I turn away from the lens. The illusion of the fourth wall mends itself as I walk toward the plush velvet armchair in the corner of my living room. I sit down with deliberate grace, crossing my legs and folding my hands in my lap. I am the audience now. I lean back against the upholstery, relishing the absolute paralyzing shock suffocating my mother. Valerie looks as though all the air has been violently sucked from her lungs. Her perfectly manicured hands tremble as she clutches the collar of her designer coat. Her mouth opens and closes, but no sound emerges. The haughty, untouchable matriarch of Atlanta high society has been reduced to a gasping, terrified shell. "Diana?" Valerie finally chokes out. The name sounds like a curse tearing at her throat. "How are you here?" Ms. Sterling does not raise her voice. She does not need to. Her presence commands the cramped space with the gravitational pull of a black hole. She steps further into the room, her $1,000 heels clicking softly against the wood. "You look exactly the same, Valerie," Ms. Sterling says, her tone conversational, but laced with absolute zero frost. "Still hiding behind expensive fabrics. Still letting other people do your dirty work. I have spent the last 30 years wondering if you ever felt a single ounce of remorse for what you did. Seeing you stand here ready to throw your own daughter to the police to save your public image answers my question perfectly." The room is deathly quiet. Even the police officers stand frozen, sensing the monumental weight of the history unfolding before them. "30 years ago," Ms. Sterling continues, addressing the room but keeping her piercing gaze locked on my mother. "This woman stole my future. Before there was a logistics empire, before the country clubs and the galas, there was a modest seed fund left by our grandfather. It was meant to launch my first technology firm. It was my birthright and my grandmother's dying blessing. But Valerie could not stand the thought of me succeeding. She forged the trust documents. She manipulated the family attorneys. She drained the accounts to finance her own lifestyle and convinced our grandmother that I had squandered the money on reckless gambling." Valerie steps backward, shaking her head in frantic denial. "That is a lie! You were unstable. You ran away." "I was forced out onto the streets," Ms. Sterling corrects, her voice cracking like a whip. "You left me with nothing but the clothes on my back. You stole my inheritance, stole my family, and built your entire empire on the bones of my future. You thought I would just disappear and die quietly, but I did not. I built Horizon Digital from scratch. I built a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. And I waited. I watched you raise your children in a house built on fraud. I watched you praise Chloe for her superficial obedience, while you punished Nia for possessing the exact same brilliance and independence you despised in me. I watched Trent from the corner of my eye. He is sweating profusely. Great beads of moisture gather on his forehead and roll down his neck, soaking the collar of his custom shirt. His eyes dart wildly between Ms. Sterling and the 3 elite corporate lawyers standing by the door. The horrifying realization is finally crashing down on him. He did not just try to frame a mid-level data analyst. He tried to frame the protege and blood relative of a tech billionaire. He picked a fight with a financial leviathan, and he is entirely out of his depth. Chloe remains curled on the floor, staring blankly at the shattered screen of her phone. The Instagram live broadcast is still running, capturing every damning word of this family reckoning. She is hyperventilating, realizing that her entire life of privilege was funded by theft, and that the husband she worshipped has just thrown it all away. The lead detective clears his throat, breaking the heavy silence. He looks at the stack of federally authenticated documents in his hand and then turns his attention fully toward Trent. The predatory gaze of law enforcement has found its proper target. Trenton Vance, the detective says, his voice stripped of any earlier hesitation. Based on these cybersecurity logs and the evidence of offshore wire fraud, you are now the primary suspect in a federal embezzlement investigation. You are not under arrest at this exact moment while we verify these documents with the Federal Banking Commission. But let me be absolutely clear. Do not leave the city. Surrender your passport to the precinct tomorrow morning. If you attempt to board a plane or cross state lines, I will have U.S. Marshals hunt you down. Trent shrinks against the wall. The officers step back, forming a perimeter near the door, effectively blocking his only exit. He is trapped. Marcus finally finds his voice. He straightens his suit jacket, desperately trying to salvage some shred of his patriarchal authority. He looks at Ms. Sterling with a mixture of fear and forced indignation. "Diana," Marcus says, puffing out his chest. "What Trent did is inexcusable. He manipulated Chloe and he stole from my company. He is a criminal. But I had absolutely nothing to do with your past conflict with Valerie. I am a victim here. Trent defrauded my logistics firm. I will be pressing full charges against him tomorrow." Ms. Sterling turns her attention to Marcus. The temperature in the room seems to drop another 10 degrees. She looks him up and down with an expression of pure, unadulterated pity. "You really have no idea what is happening, do you, Marcus?" Ms. Sterling asks softly. She reaches out and takes a sleek manila folder from the hands of her lead litigator. She does not hand it to Marcus. She simply opens it and holds it up for him to see. It is a legal injunction bearing the seal of the Federal Bankruptcy Court. "You think Trent is the only one who has been busy?" Ms. Sterling says, a predatory smile mirroring the one on my face. "Your logistics firm has been operating on razor-thin margins for 3 years. You were relying on that final round of venture capital funding to keep the lights on and pay your suppliers. Funding that was scheduled to clear this evening." Marcus swallows hard, his eyes widening. "My funding is secure." "Your funding was provided by a subsidiary of Horizon Digital," Ms. Sterling replies. "My subsidiary. And due to the sudden discovery of massive internal fraud and offshore embezzlement within your executive team, we triggered the morality and gross negligence clauses in your contract. We pulled the funding." Marcus staggers backward as if he has been struck by a physical blow. He looks wildly at Trent, then back at Ms. Sterling. "By the way, Marcus," Ms. Sterling says, her voice ringing with absolute finality, "your logistics company, it went bankrupt 2 hours ago." The camera slowly pans across the expansive, sun-drenched living room of a Horizon Digital corporate penthouse, emphasizing the breathtaking wealth and security I now possess. Floor-to-ceiling windows offer a commanding panoramic view of the Atlanta skyline, a city I no longer view from the bottom up. The lens glides over imported Italian marble, custom minimalist furniture, and a massive mahogany desk before snapping sharply back to my face. My expression is sharp, calculating, and completely devoid of pity. I sit back, crossing my legs, taking a slow sip from a crystal glass of water. I relish the memory of my mother's absolute suffocating shock and my father's instantaneous financial demise. The cramped, targeted apartment of yesterday is gone. I am now operating from the fortress of a billionaire, watching my abusers burn in the fires they lit themselves. By the time the sun rises the next morning, chaos has entirely consumed the Harrington mansion. I do not need to be physically present to witness their destruction. My forensic tracking software remains deeply embedded in the logistics company's network, logging every frantic, terrified keystroke my father makes. Marcus is barricaded inside his opulent home office, locking the heavy oak doors against the outside world. He is desperately attempting to access the company's primary operational accounts. He believes that if he can just log in, he can shift funds, secure an emergency bridge loan, or call in favors from his wealthy country club associates to keep the firm afloat. But as he punches his credentials into the corporate banking portal, he is met with a staggering, fatal reality. The account balances do not simply read zero, they are vastly overdrawn. Trent did not just steal the liquid reserve cash. Before his accounts were flagged and frozen by my biometric locks, he spent the last 6 months systematically draining the lifeblood of the company. He maxed out every corporate credit line, siphoned the employee payroll accounts, and liquidated the short-term assets. Marcus sits staring at the glowing monitors, his breathing shallow and rapid. His chest heaves as he realizes his empire is completely bankrupt. He is millions of dollars in the red. The legacy he prized above his own daughter, the wealth he used to justify his cruelty, is nothing but a hollow crater. He is entirely ruined. Down the hall in the grand marble foyer of the mansion, a different kind of destruction is unfolding. Chloe has spent the entire night sobbing on the staircase, waiting for Trent to offer some miraculous, comforting explanation for the raid. She still believes in the fairy tale. She still believes she is the cherished wife of a misunderstood genius. When Trent finally storms down the sweeping staircase, he is not carrying flowers or apologies. He is carrying a hastily stuffed leather duffel bag, his eyes darting frantically as he looks for anything valuable he can pawn for a quick cash escape. Chloe scrambles to her feet, grabbing his arm. She begs him to stay, pleading with him to tell her it was all a terrible misunderstanding, that they can hire lawyers and fix this together. She promises to use her influencer status to clear his name, crying that their love can survive any scandal. Trent stops. He rips his arm out of her grasp with a violent, disgusted jerk. The loving, supportive, progressive white savior act shatters completely, leaving behind nothing but the cold, calculating predator he always was. He looks at her not with affection, but with absolute revulsion. He tells her she is nothing but a pathetic, gullible pawn. He laughs in her face, mocking her desperate need for validation and her obsessive, endless vanity. He admits he never loved her for a single second. He tells her that her only value was her proximity to the company accounts and her willingness to sign any document he placed in front of her without reading it. He openly confesses that he despised every moment he spent pretending to tolerate her shallow, image-obsessed family. He calls her a disposable tool, a means to an end, and tells her that she deserves the massive public humiliation coming her way. Leaving her crumpled and hyperventilating on the imported rug, Trent flees the mansion, sprinting toward a waiting taxi before the federal marshals can arrive with a warrant for his arrest. The implosion of their perfect world is absolute. Hours later, the secure intercom at my penthouse buzzes. The concierge informs me I have a visitor downstairs demanding to see me. I pull up the high-definition security feed on my tablet. It is Chloe. The sight of her is almost jarring. Her designer clothes are wrinkled and stained. Her flawless makeup is completely ruined, running down her face in dark streaks. Her eyes are swollen shut from crying, and she is pacing nervously, looking over her shoulder, as if expecting the police to tackle her at any moment. I instruct the concierge to send her up to my floor. She stands at my double doors, trembling uncontrollably. She does not apologize for Valerie slapping me. She does not apologize for bringing a live audience to witness my false arrest. She does not express a single ounce of remorse for the years of psychological torment she put me through. Instead, she begs. She drops her pride and asks me for cash. She pleads for a massive loan from my newfound wealth, so she can flee the city before the scandal hits the major tabloids and the federal authorities seize her personal assets. She expects the loyal, submissive sister she stepped on for years to suddenly save her from the consequences of her own blinding ignorance. I look at her feeling absolutely nothing but cold, hard closure. I tell her the Bank of Nia is permanently closed. I step back, grasp the heavy brass handle, and shut the door directly in her face. If a camera were positioned to capture this exact moment, it would push into an extreme close-up of my mouth, catching the slight upward curve of my lips as I articulate the absolute destruction of my family's empire. Every syllable I speak is measured cold and meticulously calculated. I sit across from Diana Sterling at the massive obsidian conference table in the penthouse boardroom of Sterling Holdings. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, the Atlanta skyline stretches out beneath us, bathed in the harsh, bright light of mid-morning. This is the city my parents claim to rule. From up here, they look like nothing more than ants scrambling in a maze of their own making. The digital auction clock on the screen between us ticks down its final agonizing seconds. The historic Harrington estate on Oakwood Drive, the sacred preservation trust that my parents allowed Trent to desecrate and leverage to absolute ruin, is officially on the public auction block. The primary lending bank triggered the default precisely at noon yesterday, just as I knew they would. Panic has completely overtaken the creditors. Trent's underground bookies have aggressively moved in placing heavy, unyielding liens against Marcus's logistics fleet to recoup the $8 million Trent lost at the high-stakes tables in Macau and Vegas. The corporate accounts are drained, the operational capital is gone, and the entire logistics network is bleeding out in real time. My father's creditors are scrambling desperate to liquidate any available assets to stop the financial hemorrhaging. They are looking for a rapid cash buyout, willing to take pennies on the dollar, just to escape the blast radius of Trent's massive federal fraud. They are looking for a savior to bail them out before the federal authorities freeze everything. They found me instead. Over the past 6 months working under Diana, I have not just been an analyst. I have been the chief architect of the most lucrative cybersecurity infrastructure upgrades in the financial sector. The corporate bonuses I accumulated were staggering, safely invested, and quietly compounding, while my family treated me like dirt on their shoes. But even my substantial capital is just a fraction of the leverage I am wielding today. Diana sits silently across from me, her hands folded, her vast financial war chest fully opened and backing my every move. She is not just giving me capital, she is giving me the supreme, unassailable power of the Sterling Holdings acquisition division. We have spent the entire morning watching the vultures circle my father's bleeding company. I tap the final keystroke on my laptop, submitting the irrevocable wire transfers. I absolutely refuse to let a stranger buy my grandmother's legacy. That house was the only place I ever felt safe as a child. It holds the library where I learned to read, the wraparound porches where my grandmother taught me about the resilience of the women in our bloodline. I bypassed the public bidding war entirely, using a preemptive secured cash offer orchestrated by Diana's elite legal team. The bank accepts the transfer instantaneously, deeply relieved to wash their hands of the toxic asset before the press catches wind of the scandal. The screen refreshes, confirming the transaction with a bright green banner. The deed to 4200 Oakwood Drive is legally and permanently transferred into my name. I just bought my parents' house right out from under them. I now own the very walls that echo with their constant criticism and cruelty. But I do not stop there. The logistics firm is rapidly collapsing under the weight of Trent's aggressive liens. The board of directors, terrified of personal liability and federal audits, has authorized an emergency fire sale of the company's controlling shares. They are begging for a corporate buyout to save the firm from immediate dissolution and bankruptcy. I authorize a second massive wire transfer routing the funds through a newly formed holding company where I sit as the sole majority shareholder. The transaction is flawless and lightning fast. I purchase 51% of Harrington Logistics, acquiring the controlling stake for a fraction of its original valuation. I close the laptop with a soft, definitive click. The silence in the boardroom is profound, heavy with the gravity of what has just transpired. Diana looks at me, her sharp eyes gleaming with dark, absolute approval. She raises her coffee cup in a silent toast to the execution of a flawless, hostile takeover. In less than 20 minutes, I have legally dismantled 30 years of my parents' arrogance. I own the roof over their heads. I own the company my father built to stroke his own massive ego. I hold the complete, unquestionable power to liquidate their entire existence and leave them with absolutely nothing. And the most exquisite, agonizing detail of this entire bloodless coup is that they have absolutely no idea. Right at this very moment, my mother is likely standing in the grand foyer of the estate that is now legally mine, barking orders at a fleet of florists and caterers, complaining about the color of the imported roses. My father is probably picking up his custom-tailored tuxedo, blissfully ignoring the frantic calls from his panicked board of directors, assuming Trent's mess can be swept under the rug with a few clever legal maneuvers and a firm handshake. They are completely consumed by the preparations for the highly publicized 35th anniversary corporate gala scheduled for tomorrow night. It is the social event of the season in Atlanta. Valerie has spent the last year meticulously curating the guest list, inviting every major politician, local celebrity, and high society elite to celebrate the untouchable legacy of the Harrington family. They are planning to stand on a grand stage, clinking crystal champagne glasses and basking in the adoration of their peers. They believe tomorrow night will cement their status as corporate royalty. They are preparing to throw $1 million party to celebrate a company they no longer own while living in a house where they are now nothing more than my unauthorized tenants. The trap has completely closed. Tomorrow night, when the cameras are flashing and the entire city is watching, I will walk into that gala and show them exactly what happens when you treat your own blood like a disposable liability. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Waldorf Ballroom cast a golden, glittering light over the absolute pinnacle of Atlanta high society. Waiters in pristine white coats circulate with silver trays of champagne and caviar. A string quartet plays softly in the corner. It is the 35th anniversary gala of Harrington Logistics, a multi-million-dollar celebration funded entirely by credit that no longer exists. Valerie is in her element. She glides through the sea of politicians, bank executives, and socialites wearing a diamond-draped designer gown that costs more than most people earn in a year. She smiles radiantly for the society photographers, her teeth perfectly white, her posture rigid with practiced superiority. She plays the role of the untouchable matriarch flawlessly, completely unaware that the ground beneath her stiletto heels has already collapsed. She does not know that the historic mansion she plans to return to tonight legally belongs to the daughter she despises. She clinks her glass with a local judge laughing at a joke maintaining the illusion of an unbreakable empire. Across the room, Trent is working the crowd. His sheer, unadulterated audacity is almost impressive. Despite fleeing the apartment yesterday like a terrified coward, desperation has bred a dangerous, delusional kind of courage. He is wearing a custom velvet tuxedo holding a glass of scotch and chatting animatedly with a group of city officials. He believes he has found a loophole. He is planning to use this highly publicized event to announce a run for city council. In his narcissistic mind, if he becomes a public political figure, the impending federal indictment will look like a coordinated political hit job. He thinks public visibility will act as an impenetrable shield against the embezzlement charges. He is shaking hands, flashing his perfectly engineered smile, acting as though he is the savior of the Harrington legacy rather than its executioner. Then the heavy brass doors of the main ballroom swing open. The camera executes a smooth, continuous tracking shot, pulling backward to keep me perfectly framed as I advance into the room. It captures my measured, predatory stride, symbolizing my absolute refusal to shrink or hide. I am taking up space. I am dominating the narrative. I am wearing a breathtaking, custom-tailored emerald silk gown. The fabric moves like liquid metal clinging to my frame, radiating raw, unapologetic power. It is a stark, violent contrast to the cheap, ill-fitting, safety-pinned suit my family forced me to wear during the initial deposition. I am no longer the scapegoat, I am the executioner. As I walk, the low, sophisticated murmur of the ballroom falls into a sudden, stunned hush. Conversations die mid-sentence. Heads turn. The elite of Atlanta stare in unabashed fascination. Valerie spots me from across the room. The champagne flute in her hand jerks violently, spilling expensive liquor down the front of her pristine dress. Her flawless socialite mask shatters, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. She grabs Marcus by the arm, her painted fingernails digging into his tuxedo jacket. Marcus turns his face draining of all color until he looks like a walking corpse. He knows I hold the federal logs. He knows the police were at my apartment. He does not understand how I am walking freely into his exclusive gala looking like royalty. Trent freezes near the ice sculpture. His practiced smile contorts into a grotesque grimace. His eyes dart toward the exits, the primal instinct of a cornered animal kicking in. But he realizes that fleeing now in front of the politicians and investors he is trying to woo would destroy his final desperate gambit. I do not stop. I glide effortlessly through the parted sea of billionaires and socialites, my expression entirely serene. I do not look at my parents. I do not acknowledge Trent. I simply take my seat at a reserved VIP table near the front of the stage, smoothing my emerald silk skirt, and calmly signal a waiter for a glass of sparkling water. I sit back crossing my legs, projecting absolute terrifying calm. Trent watches me, the sweat beginning to bead on his forehead, ruining his perfectly styled hair. He realizes the walls are closing in rapidly. He abandons his conversation with a state senator and signals the string quartet to stop playing. The music grinds to an abrupt, awkward halt. Trent rushes the stage, his steps slightly frantic. He adjusts his bow tie, his breathing shallow as he steps up to the podium. He is playing his final card. He plans to hijack the narrative entirely. He intends to publicly force Marcus into early retirement right here on the stage, declaring himself the new CEO of Harrington Logistics before announcing his political campaign. He believes that if he seizes the crown in front of 500 witnesses, Marcus will be too paralyzed by social convention to stop him, and I will be rendered powerless. Trent grabs the microphone off its stand. The feedback whines sharply through the ballroom speakers, causing several guests to wince. He grips the podium with white knuckles, projecting his voice over the confused crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," Trent says, his voice booming with forced, hollow confidence, "thank you all for gathering to celebrate 35 years of excellence. Tonight marks a profound transition. As the newly appointed CEO of Harrington Logistics and your future city councilman, I am proud to lead this family into a new era." He raises his hand to signal for applause. Before a single person can clap, before Valerie can scream, before Marcus can storm the stage, the massive crystal chandeliers above us die. The stage lights cut out instantly. The entire grand ballroom is plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness. For 5 agonizing seconds, the Grand Waldorf Ballroom is buried in absolute suffocating blackness. The immediate silence is heavy, quickly broken by the nervous, fluttering murmurs of 500 elite guests suddenly plunged into the dark. Glasses clink together in confusion. A woman lets out a startled, nervous laugh. On stage, I can hear the frantic, heavy breathing of Trent blindly tapping the dead microphone. Then, with a concussive electronic boom, the massive jumbotron behind the stage violently flickers to life. The camera movement completely shifts, adopting a shaky, kinetic, handheld rhythm. It breathes and jerks perfectly, capturing the frantic, explosive energy of the climax as the harsh, blinding white light of the screen floods the room. The lens snaps from the glaring jumbotron to Trent's horrified, illuminated face and then whips across the expanse of the ballroom to the elevated sound booth at the back. That is where I stand. I am bathed in the neon glow of the master mixing console, my emerald silk gown catching the sharp light. I do not look like a scapegoat. I look like a sovereign executioner. My hands move over the digital controls with rapid, practiced precision. I press the first key. A colossal, high-definition forensic accounting flowchart dominates the 60-foot screen behind Trent. The sheer scale of it makes the data impossible to ignore. Thick, aggressive red arrows violently slash across the white background. They draw a direct, undeniable line from the Harrington Logistics operational accounts to a series of offshore shell entities registered in the Cayman Islands. The routing numbers, the timestamps, the IP addresses, they are all displayed in towering font for every politician, investor, and banking executive in the room to read. A collective synchronized gasp ripples through the crowd. The quiet murmurs instantly escalate into a chaotic roar of disbelief. The people in this room manage wealth for a living. They recognize federal wire fraud the second they see it. I hit the next button. The screen flashes, replacing the flowchart with high-resolution scans of the estate mortgage documents. The camera zooms in, magnifying the signatures at the bottom of the page. It is Chloe's distinct, looping handwriting authorizing the leveraging of our grandmother's historic estate to secure desperate high-interest loans. Right beside her signature is the undeniable proof of where those loans went: direct deposits into the holding accounts of Trent's international bookmakers. Down in the crowd, the camera catches Chloe. She is clutching her chest, her face a mask of absolute, unadulterated horror as she stares at her own forged financial death warrant projected 50 feet high. Valerie is beside her, physically swaying her hands, covering her mouth, as the carefully constructed illusion of her perfect family is publicly eviscerated. I press the third key. The screen transitions one final time, displaying the ultimate devastating blow. It is the official stamped federal bankruptcy filing for Harrington Logistics. Marcus's name is listed directly under the declaration of total insolvency. The debt figures are staggering, displayed in bold red ink. The empire is dead, and now the entire city knows it. On stage, Trent completely loses his mind. The polished, charismatic future politician vanishes. He drops the microphone, letting it hit the hardwood stage with a sharp, piercing screech. He turns wildly toward the jumbotron, waving his arms like a madman. "Cut the feed!" Trent screams, his voice cracking with sheer, unfiltered panic. He lunges toward the edge of the stage, shouting at the stunned security guards. "Turn the screen off! Shut it down right now!" He scrambles toward the heavy black curtains, desperately tearing at the thick bundles of audio-visual cables, trying to physically rip the power cords from the wall. But the main feed is hardwired directly into the soundboard, and the soundboard is entirely under my control. I look down at him from the booth, a cold, predatory smile spreading across my face. I reach forward and flip the master audio override switch. The state-of-the-art ballroom speakers designed to amplify grand symphonies and elegant jazz suddenly emit a harsh, static-laced click. I launch the audio file I extracted from his confiscated devices. It is the recording of the burner phone call Trent made from the private charter terminal on the night he orchestrated the police raid on my apartment. Trent's voice booms through the cavernous ballroom, echoing off the crystal chandeliers and the gilded walls. But it is not his smooth public relations voice. It is a vicious, arrogant sneer, dripping with entitlement and venom. "Of course it worked." Trent's recorded voice gloats, the audio crystal clear. "Marcus is an aging, gullible fool. He practically handed me the access codes, and Chloe, God, she is a pathetic, airheaded pawn. I put the offshore transfer papers right in front of her face, told her it was for a tax-exempt trust, and she signed it without reading a single word. I never loved her for a second. She is just a useful idiot." The crowd is paralyzed. The silence in the room is so absolute it feels physical. Chloe lets out a shattered, agonizing wail, collapsing against a cocktail table as her husband's cruel, mocking laughter fills the room. But the recording is not finished. The worst is yet to come. "I drained the logistics firm completely dry." The recorded Trent continues boasting to his bookie. He then unleashes a string of vile, aggressive racial slurs, the kind of deeply ingrained bigotry he kept hidden behind his progressive, polished mask. He spits the words out with absolute disgust. "I pinned the entire embezzlement on the ghetto sister. The police are kicking in her door right now. Let the ungrateful liability take the fall. I will be on a beach in the Maldives before they even figure out the money is gone." The audio cuts out, leaving a ringing, deafening silence in its wake. The mic drop is absolute. The devastation is complete. I stand in the booth, staring down at the wreckage of my abusers, bathed in the glow of the screen that just sealed their fate. The emergency backup lights slam on with a heavy industrial thud. The sudden, unforgiving fluorescent glare completely murders the romantic, curated ambiance of the grand Waldorf ballroom. The deafening silence that followed Trent's recorded confession holds for exactly 3 seconds before the entire room shatters into absolute, uncontrollable pandemonium. 500 of Atlanta's most powerful citizens erupt into a symphony of gasps, shouts, and frantic whispers. The society photographers, sensing the absolute destruction of a dynasty, abandon all pretense of high society decorum. Camera flashes explode across the room, like violent strobe lights, capturing every angle of the Harrington family's public execution. From my vantage point in the sound booth, I watch the carnage unfold perfectly. The cinematography shifts instantly. The camera executes a brutal fast pan from left to right, a kinetic and erratic movement that perfectly matches the frantic, explosive reality of an empire tearing itself apart in real time. The fast pan stops abruptly on the velvet-roped VIP section. There, sitting among the bewildered bank executives, is a tall blonde woman in a backless crimson dress. This is Jessica. Trent had introduced her earlier in the evening as a premier political consultant brought in to manage his upcoming campaign logistics. In reality, she is the woman from the Cayman Island vacation photos, the woman Trent used to mock his wife. Realizing the narrative has violently flipped, Jessica attempts to melt into the shadows. She ducks her head, clutching her sequined purse, and tries to speedwalk toward the discreet side exit reserved for staff. In her sheer panic, her stiletto heel catches the edge of a Persian rug. She stumbles hard, crashing into a towering silver tray of champagne flutes. The crystal shatters across the marble floor with a deafening crash, drawing the attention of the entire right side of the ballroom. A local investigative reporter who has been aggressively tracking Trent's real estate acquisitions points a sharp finger directly at her. He shouts over the chaos, recognizing her face from the leaked offshore banking documents. Across the room, Chloe snaps. She has been standing near a melting swan ice sculpture, physically trembling as the audio of her husband calling her a pathetic air-headed pawn echoed through the speakers. The deep, ingrained humiliation breaks something fundamental inside her mind. She follows the reporter's pointing finger and locks eyes with the blonde woman in the crimson dress. Chloe lets out a guttural, unhinged scream that rips through the sophisticated murmur of the ballroom. It is the sound of a woman who realizes her entire life, her marriage, and her financial security are a complete, humiliating lie. Chloe kicks off her $600 designer heels. She does not care about the cameras. She does not care about the state senators watching her. She lunges across the polished dance floor like a heat-seeking missile. She tackles Jessica just as the mistress reaches the heavy velvet ropes of the VIP exit. It is not a polite high society disagreement. It is a vicious, feral brawl. Chloe grabs a massive fistful of Jessica's blonde hair, yanking her backward with terrifying primal force. Jessica shrieks in pain, flailing wildly and clawing at Chloe's face. They crash backward into a catered buffet table. Silver platters of roasted quail and imported caviar fly into the air, raining down onto the tuxedoed laps of terrified logistics investors. The crowd surges backward to avoid the flying food, but the press surges forward. Lenses are practically shoved into the women's faces. Chloe is screaming incoherently, slapping and scratching, while the mistress desperately tries to protect her face from the onslaught. The tearing of expensive silk and the snapping of a pearl necklace echo loudly. It is the absolute degradation of the Harrington name broadcast live to every news outlet in the state. The camera executes another rapid, unstable pan, whipping back to the center of the room to find Valerie. The matriarch is standing entirely alone. The sea of politicians, charity board chairs, and generational wealth heiresses, the very people she has spent 30 years lying, cheating, and stepping on my neck to impress, are physically backing away from her. They look at Valerie not with anger but with absolute nauseating pity and disgust. They are treating her like she is highly infectious. Valerie looks around at the faces of her country club friends. She sees women she played tennis with yesterday turning their backs on her. She sees bank presidents whispering behind their hands, calculating how fast they can distance themselves from her toxic brand. She realizes with crushing clarity that her social standing is permanently obliterated. She is a pariah. Her perfectly structured, arrogant world crumbles into ash. Valerie's knees buckle under the weight of her disgrace. She drops heavily to the hardwood floor, the yards of her heavy, diamond-draped designer gown pooling around her like a deflated parachute. She covers her face with trembling, manicured hands, sobbing openly and loudly as her untouchable status evaporates into thin air. And what does the great Trent Harrington do while his wife brawls in the caviar and his mother weeps in public disgrace? He proves exactly what kind of man he is. He runs. The fast pan catches him slipping away from the podium. His face is ghost-white, slick with panicked sweat. He abandons his family without a single backward glance. He sprints toward the heavy, swinging brass doors of the catering kitchen at the back of the ballroom. A terrified waiter carrying a stack of empty plates steps into his path. Trent violently shoves the young man out of the way, sending the plates crashing to the floor in a shower of white porcelain. Trent reaches the double doors. He grabs the brass handles with white knuckles, using his entire body weight to throw them open. He is desperate to reach the service elevator to escape into the Atlanta night, to run from the consequences he created. He bursts through the swinging doors, panting heavily, his custom velvet tuxedo jacket torn at the shoulder. But he does not find an empty service hallway. He does not find an escape route. He finds a solid wall of navy blue windbreakers. 5 federal agents stand shoulder to shoulder in the narrow corridor, their gold badges gleaming under the harsh fluorescent kitchen lights. The lead agent steps forward, blocking Trent's path completely. He reaches to his tactical belt, pulling out a pair of heavy cold steel handcuffs. The metallic clink of the cuffs echoes in the cramped hallway, a sound that signals the absolute end of the Harrington Empire. Trent thrashes wildly against the unyielding grip of the federal agents. The heavy steel handcuffs bite deep into his wrists, locking his hands firmly behind his back. He screams for his lawyers, his voice cracking with a high, panicked pitch that completely shatters his suave, calculated persona. He threatens the agents, sputters about his political connections, and demands to speak with the mayor, but his desperate protests fall on deaf ears. The lead agent simply jerks him forward by the collar of his ruined velvet tuxedo. They do not allow him to quietly exit through the back alley. Instead, they march him directly out of the service corridor and back into the glaring lights of the main ballroom. The press descends like starving wolves. Flashbulbs explode in a blinding, relentless strobe effect, capturing every humiliating second of Trent's public perp walk. He tries to duck his head, trying to hide his tear-streaked, sweat-slicked face from the cameras, but the damage is irrevocably done. The golden boy of the Harrington family is paraded through the center of his own anniversary gala in federal chains. Marcus watches his son-in-law being hauled away, and instead of accepting defeat, his deeply ingrained narcissism takes over. He refuses to believe his untouchable reign is over. He steps away from the VIP table and aggressively climbs onto the edge of the stage. His face is flushed, a dangerous mottled purple. He waves his arms frantically, shouting over the chaotic din of the ballroom, desperately trying to command the attention of the fleeing bank executives and terrified investors. He lies through his teeth, bellowing that this is a temporary setback, a gross misunderstanding orchestrated by jealous competitors. He promises the crowd that the Harrington family will recover their company, that their logistics empire is financially rock solid, and that they remain in absolute control. His voice echoes pitifully, a desperate, hollow sound in a room that has already completely written him off. It is time to end this. The camera slowly booms up, elevating above the frantic crowd, looking slightly down at me as I stand from my seat at the soundboard. I am the ultimate victor, calmly surveying her conquered territory. I step out from the shadows of the booth and walk deliberately down the center aisle. The sea of panicked socialites and scrambling executives instantly parts for me. They recognize the undeniable shift in power. I glide up the wooden steps of the stage, the emerald silk of my gown sweeping majestically behind me. I walk directly past my father, ignoring his frantic, red-faced rambling, and smoothly pick up the discarded microphone from the floor. I tap the mic once. The sharp, piercing sound cuts through the remaining noise in the room like a gunshot. The ballroom falls dead silent. Every camera lens, every cell phone, every terrified pair of eyes locks onto me. I open my designer purse and pull out a thick, heavy stack of embossed legal deeds. I hold them up, letting the harsh stage lights catch the official state seals. I speak with absolute chilling clarity, my voice projecting effortlessly over the crowd. I announce that the Harrington logistics empire Marcus is desperately trying to sell them no longer exists. I inform the press and the elite investors that due to massive, catastrophic federal defaults triggered by Trent's embezzlement, the board of directors authorized an emergency fire sale this morning. I declare officially and publicly that Sterling Holdings has executed a complete, irrevocable, hostile takeover. We now own 51% of the company's controlling shares. I look directly at my father as I deliver the final lethal blow. I announce that the board has been entirely restructured, and I am the newly appointed sole chief executive officer. Marcus physically staggers backward as if he has been shot in the chest. He grips the wooden podium to keep his legs from giving out, his mouth opening and closing in silent, suffocated horror. In less than a minute, I have legally stripped him of his title, his company, and his entire identity. Down on the floor, Valerie completely snaps. She shoves her way through the paralyzed crowd, her diamond-draped gown stained with spilled champagne, her perfect hair disheveled from the chaos. She marches to the foot of the stage, her face twisted into a mask of haughty, desperate denial. She refuses to accept that the daughter she treated like dirt has just orchestrated her total ruin. She points a shaking, manicured finger at me, screaming that I am a vindictive liar. "You cannot do this!" Valerie shrieks, her voice grating and shrill, echoing miserably through the silent ballroom. She clings frantically to the last remaining symbol of their generational wealth, the one thing that gives her status among the country club elite. "We still have our home. We still have the Harrington estate." She looks around at her wealthy peers, trying to rally their support, trying to prove she is still one of them. She declares that they will retreat to their mansion, regroup, and destroy me in court. She is holding on to an illusion that I crushed hours ago. I look down at her from the stage. I do not feel anger. I do not feel pity. I feel absolutely nothing but the cold satisfaction of a perfectly executed checkmate. I smile coldly, a slow, predatory curve of my lips. I reach into my purse one final time and pull out a single crisp document bearing the official seal of the county clerk. I hold it up to the light, ensuring every camera in the room captures the deed. "Actually, Mother," I say, my voice dripping with icy, meticulous precision, "I bypassed the bank default and bought the deed at auction this morning. The estate is legally registered in my name." I lean slightly closer to the microphone, delivering the final, inescapable truth. "You do not have a home to return to. You are currently standing in a rented room celebrating a company you no longer own. And when this party ends, you are officially trespassing on my property." The chaotic noise of the ballroom abruptly cuts to the relentless driving sound of torrential rain. The transition is violent and absolute. I stand perfectly dry just inside the grand threshold of 4200 Oakwood Drive. The massive double doors are pulled wide open, framing the pathetic, soaked remnants of the Harrington family. Valerie, Marcus, and Chloe huddle together on the sweeping front porch. Their hastily packed, waterlogged designer luggage sits in puddles around their feet. The harsh porch light illuminates their absolute ruin. Valerie's mascara runs down her face in thick black rivers. Her soaked gown clings to her shivering frame, completely ruined by the storm. She reaches out a trembling hand toward me. She begs, her voice cracking over the roar of the downpour. She cries about family blood, about how I cannot possibly throw my own mother out into the freezing rain. Marcus stands beside her, looking aged and broken, his shoulders slumped, unable to even meet my eyes. He was a titan of industry just hours ago, and now he is a shivering old man with absolutely nothing to his name. Chloe is openly weeping, shivering violently in the cold wind, entirely dependent on a family structure that no longer exists. She clutches her arms around herself, looking like a terrified child who has just realized the monsters are real. I look at their outstretched hands and feel an absolute profound emptiness where my familial obligation used to be. I look Valerie dead in the eye and speak with a voice made of pure ice. I remind her of the safety pin suit I was forced to wear to the deposition. I remind her of the mocking laughter, the years of gaslighting, the decades spent treating me like a disposable asset while showering Trent with unconditional praise and endless capital. I tell her that family blood is nothing but a biological accident. They chose their allegiance when they threw me to the wolves to save a thief. Now they are simply experiencing the natural, unyielding consequences of their own spectacular arrogance. Valerie screams my name one final desperate time, lunging forward slightly, as if she can physically force her way back into the life she squandered. I do not flinch. I step back and grab the heavy brass handles of the custom oak doors. I pull the heavy doors shut, locking the deadbolt with a loud, definitive click, leaving them outside in the dark and the unforgiving rain. 6 months later, the dust has completely settled over Atlanta. The Harrington legacy is nothing but a cautionary tale whispered in corporate boardrooms and high society salons. I sit in my expansive new penthouse office at Sterling Holdings. The walls are floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic, unobstructed view of the city skyline. Diana Sterling's office is right next to mine, a silent testament to a partnership built on mutual respect and ruthless efficiency. The logistics portfolio I managed to acquire has tripled in value under my direct restructuring. I am no longer just a financial analyst, I am a corporate kingmaker. The universe has a beautiful way of balancing the scales. Chloe, stripped of her stolen offshore assets and completely abandoned by her wealthy social circle, now works a minimum wage retail job at a discount department store in the deep suburbs. I recently drove past the storefront just to see it. She spends her days standing on her aching feet for 8 hours, folding cheap polyester sweaters and apologizing to rude, demanding customers under harsh fluorescent lights. Her designer wardrobe has been repossessed. Her haughty, entitled sneer has been replaced by the permanent, exhausting fatigue of the working class she used to openly mock. Valerie is a ghost haunting the edges of her own former life. She currently rents a tiny, depressing apartment on the wrong side of the city. She still attempts to show up at her old country club, desperately hoping to be invited to sit with the women she once ruled. But they look right through her. They turn their backs, sip their dry martinis, and pretend she does not exist. She is experiencing the absolute worst fate a narcissist can ever endure. She has become completely invisible. Marcus lost his entire logistical network and his executive pension. He spends his days sitting in a cheap rented armchair, watching daytime television, a hollow, silent shell of the commanding CEO he once pretended to be. And Trent, the golden boy, the future city councilman. He is currently residing in a maximum security federal penitentiary facility, completely stripped of his custom velvet tuxedos and offshore accounts. The federal prosecutors did not offer a plea deal. They brought the full crushing weight of the justice system down on his head. He is facing 20 years in federal prison for massive corporate embezzlement, wire fraud, and grand larceny. There are no cameras for him to smile for. There are no politicians for him to charm. He is just another inmate in an orange jumpsuit locked in a concrete cell, entirely powerless and forgotten. The camera executes a smooth, flawless movement, tracking slowly across the gleaming obsidian surface of my desk. I pick up a crystal glass of expensive red wine. The dark liquid catches the ambient light of the city below. I take a slow, appreciative sip, savoring the taste of absolute, unmitigated victory. I turn my leather chair to face the sprawling metropolis I have conquered. Blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family. They demanded my loyalty while offering none in return. They tried to break me, tried to use me as a stepping stone to save their rotting empire. Instead, I chose myself. I fought back with everything I had, and I won absolutely everything. The camera pushes in steadily, closing the physical distance until it captures an extreme close-up of my face. The movement is perfectly smooth, devoid of any shake or hesitation, reflecting my total, absolute control over the narrative and my own destiny. I look directly into the lens, piercing through the glass. I allow a chilling, victorious smile to spread slowly across my face, acknowledging the audience, acknowledging my absolute triumph. The screen cuts instantly to black.